Sir John, how are you, man?
Good. How you doing?
Oh my God, I miss you, man. We've been
I
talking, and
I know what it's been like 2 years since I was out there,
it's been
something
two
like that.
years.
Yeah,
Yeah, but you've been busy.
it's been a good run. It has been really, yeah, it's been kind of crazy for the last couple of years. It's been a good run. Lots of producing, some directing, some movies coming out. It's been really, really cool.
I love it. Listen, Jon Keeyes, please introduce yourself to the audience, and then tell us your story, how you got started, and then I'll jump in with a bunch of questions.
Okay. Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jon Keeyes. Director, writer, producer, hyphenates. I've been in the business for 25 years. My first movie I shot it in 1999, was a movie called American Nightmare. It was a little low budget horror movie that me and my friends put together. I wrote it, I directed it, I produced it. We didn't know what we were doing. We just decided we were going to go out and make a movie, um, and it came out and it did really, really well. And the movie, I mean, 25 years later, it's still in distribution. I mean, it just got a big Blu-ray collector's edition, special edition with all updated documentaries and stuff. So yeah, I got a taste of it in
What's it
99.
called?
American Nightmare. American Nightmare
There,
with
there.
yeah, Debbie Rochon. It's a horror movie. And it came out and did really well. The reviews were fantastic. And suddenly I had other companies asking me, started reaching out like, hey, can you make a movie for us? Hey, can you make a movie for us? And, I found very quickly, I mean, I would say it was probably by like my third or fourth year after American Nightmare came out that I was staying busy enough that I was able to make a living as a filmmaker, and I've been doing the same thing ever since. I'm not even sure where I'm at now. I've directed 15 or 16 movies. I've produced close to 60. Um,
Wow.
and it's been a really great ride. I did a couple of years ago, guess it's been maybe about a year and a half ago. I did two movies. I got to go over to Ireland and direct two movies over in Ireland with Antonio Banderas. And one was called Cult Killer with Antonio and Alice Eve that Sony released earlier in 2024. It's out on Hulu now. And then I did another one with Antonio and Jonathan Rhys Meyers and Melissa Leo called Cleanup Crew. That came out over the summer, and it's out on Prime, Amazon and all those places to rent from and stuff. But yeah, and then God, this year I've co-produced four movies this year, and then I just got done over the fall, directing another horror movie, an action horror movie with William H Macy and Katie Cassidy called Speed Demon. That was so it's been a wild ride.
Well, it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. I mean, John, you're a diamond in the rough when it comes to the entertainment business. I met you on a set, and I have to say, like little did I know how fascinating and what kind of a career you've had. So, what was your background? Did you study film? How did you get into it?
I I completely fell into it by accident. It's funny. I grew up in Los Angeles. My grandfather was a professional football player back in the 40s, but he was also a bit actor, and he did a lot of and I when I say bit actor, I'm talking more like background, But he did a lot of stuff, and so we grew up with a love for movies. But my whole life, I never expected to be in the movie business. I wanted to be a writer, and I thought I was going to be a novelist. And, I mean, from age 5, I was writing short stories. My mom's got a huge box of all these short stories I wrote as a kid, all the way growing up. And so my whole life, I expected to be a writer. And then flash forward into my 20s, and I owned a bookstore. I had opened a bookstore in Fort Worth, Texas. I moved to Texas and was writing for a magazine. I started writing for a magazine there, and the bookstore, our lease was up, and I was getting ready to move it, and the magazine came over and heard that I was shutting the bookstore down, and so they're like, hey, how about, would you like to become a senior writer for the magazine? And I'm like, yeah,
Wow.
because of course writing's what I wanted to do. So I sold off the bookstore. I went and worked for them, and literally 2 months, 3 months after I went to work, they got bought out by another publishing company. Everybody got fired, but they were like, you, John, you just started, so you can stay, and we're going to put you in charge of the entertainment department in the magazine. And
Wow.
I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm not going to tell you that. And, and suddenly I find myself running the entertainment department, doing movie reviews and music reviews and book reviews and interviews and all this kind of stuff. And then as a journalist, as an entertainment journalist, I continued with them. I was writing for Playboy and Rolling Stone and Fangoria and Cinefantastique and Femme Fatale and all of these magazines. And then suddenly I find myself on movie sets as a journalist,
Wow.
and then
Wow.
doing press junkets and then doing unit publicity. Um,
Wow.
and then that's kind of what happened was, and then I was like, I wrote this screenplay and
Well,
thinking that I'm just gonna sell this screenplay to somebody. And an actor friend, an actor who I'd become friends with, she was big in the horror world, and she read the script and she's like, well, you should just, this is pre, I mean, this is 99, so it's not even digital yet. It's still film. And if you make a horror movie, you're gonna get distribution. And so,
the good
she was
old
just like, you
days.
should exactly. And she's just like, you should just go make this yourself. And I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea. I have no clue what I'm doing, but that's a great idea. And almost a year to the day after her and I had the conversation, we were on set making American Nightmare. So I completely fell into it, didn't expect it. And I mean, I so fell in love with the process, not just the writing, but the directing and the producing. I so completely fell in love with it. I was like, I don't want to do anything else. So I'm a latecomer. I was never the kid who did short films and didn't go to college. I mean, I was 29 when I made that first movie. So I was a late bloomer. A late bloomer that completely fell into it.
I think it's actually finding people like yourself about the people who have gotten into the business, whatever business that is. But now this is the entertainment business. A little later, you bring some life experiences with you. I
Yeah,
mean,
100%. Yeah,
you
no,
know,
absolutely. Yeah, it's funny is in hindsight, particularly being my age now and like looking at young writers and stuff and looking at different writers scripts and what they bring. I felt very, in a way, to your point, I felt very grateful to start when I started because of the life experience that I brought to it, not just as a writer but just as a human being in how I communicate with people, life experiences. As a producer, it's funny, as out of high school, I spent 4 years in the Navy and I was in the supply department, and I'm running multi-million-dollar supply department budgets for the Navy. And like that, literally, how that translated over into budgeting movies and communicating with people and departments and things like that. There was so much life experience that I walked in with that most people that are starting out, like either right out of school, right out of college, whatever, that they just don't have. And so I got really lucky in that regard.
I have to say, John, like I can relate to what you're talking about because I kind of related to when I used to play soccer as a kid. I had a lot of energy. I could run like a beast, but I had no idea what the game was about. So I just kept going.
Oh, dude. I mean, it's so funny because like literally I spent because like I said, I never made short films. I never did any of that stuff. And my only experience on set was as a publicist. So, or as a journalist. And so, I devoured for a year when I made that decision to direct for my first time. I devoured every book I could find on directing. And I talked to all these indie directors that I had interviewed as a journalist, and I talked with them to learn as much as I could so that when I got to set, when we got to actually making the movie, I will have learned as much as I could. But I mean, just a great example was, for those who have been on a movie set, the very first take of the movie. Now, my buddy Rick, he became the first AD and the producer. We kind of put this all together ourselves with no experience. We hired a professional DP and first AC, professional sound mixer, and a professional editor. Everybody else was just friends. And the first take up, Rick calls roll sound, and the sound mixer goes speeding, and Rick and I look at each other across the set. And I'm like, and he looks at me like, "What's that?" And I just kind of shrug, and he goes, roll camera, and suddenly the first AC goes speed, and I'm just like, action. And we got done with that take. I said, cut, and he comes over and he goes, are they supposed to do that? I'm like, I don't know. Just do it again and let's see if they do it again.
Dude, this is amazing. So this is having the courage to get in there and just do it, right?
That's
Um,
exactly it. Yeah. Yeah. And it was weird because I never thought twice about doing it. That's the funny thing is I never thought twice about doing it. I've always had that nature. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I mean, I own my own business. I got out of the Navy and I owned my own business for 8 years before I went free, or 7 years before I went freelance as a journalist. And so like when Brink gave me the idea of you should just go make this, I was just like, yeah, sure, let's go do it. And then of course I had, like, I think everybody who gets in the movie business, you create very high expectations, and then reality sets in of how difficult the business actually is. And 25 years later, I still tell people it's perseverance, perseverance, perseverance. Never, if it means that much to you, never ever give up. And and set high expectations for yourself, but also understand the realities of the world, that what this industry is like, and make smart choices for yourself. But if you just want to make movies, go make movies. You will figure out a way to make movies.
Amazing advice. I was just speaking to somebody yesterday about this exact thing. The business itself, uh, the community is your close friends and the people that you connect with in the business. But the other part of it is there is no community in sense of, yes, there are unions, there are all these things that are out there, but the core driver is you and your desires and how to do what you do, and
Yeah.
there's no reasoning right or wrong about that.
Right, right, right. No, there is no reason. There is no reasoning right or wrong. There are no, I mean, I even like to say there's no right or wrong choices. There's smart choices, there's life choices, but there's no right or wrong choices. I've had to learn to create, decide what's okay for me, in terms of the trajectory that I'm trying to go and what I'm trying to achieve. And at certain times, I've passed on projects or decided not to be a part of projects because of whatever's happening in my life at that moment. I'm having to make smart choices and smart steps. And there was a point in my career when all I did was horror movies. And I got really well known in horror movies and I got invited to conventions as a guest for horror. But what ended up happening at the same time was then nobody wanted me to direct anything else. Nobody trusted me to direct an action film or a drama or a comedy. And I pigeonholed myself. And so I had to step back from that and I focused just on producing and writing for a while to distance myself until an opportunity actually presented itself to direct an action movie with some big name actors. And it's like, okay, I mean, there were lots of pros and cons, right and wrong choices to be made about whether or not I did that movie. But ultimately, the choice was, I need this opportunity regardless. And so I'm going to take that chance. I'm going to take that opportunity, and it paid off. And so there's no right or wrong choices. It's just about smart choices for what's right for you.
I want to know about every movie you've made. We don't have enough time, but I'm gonna pick and choose and ask you this question: your experience on how that movie, your first movie that was from transitional from the going into an action movie, how did that fall into your lap? And talk about how you maneuvered and positioned yourself for that. I kind of have an idea, but I want to know, and also what your experience was going from a horror on your first action thriller film.
So let's see. By the time I did, so that movie was called Rogue Hostage, with John Malkovich, Tyrese Gibson, and the way it fell into my lap was really COVID. COVID's how it dropped into my lap. So I was originally going to be a co-producer on that movie, and we had been getting it set up, and there was a director from Eastern Europe. I can't remember exactly where, but there was a director already attached to that movie, and COVID hit. And once the SAG and the unions started allowing people to start going back to work and figuring out what those steps were going to be, of course, there were still lots of restrictions on people traveling, internationally. And so the director wasn't able to do the movie. And the producers were like, listen, you've been looking for an opportunity. You've been looking for a chance to work with some bigger name actors to do something outside of the horror thriller world. So this is your opportunity. Do you want to take it? And I said, yes, 100%. So COVID, I think we were the third production being made after COVID opened up, because I know it was either the second or the third, because I talked about it, that we were the second or the third. Um, but it was interesting was I when I did that, I didn't really think. I had distanced myself. It had been long enough since I had actually directed something that I wasn't really kind of doing the apples to oranges thing in terms of what's it like, because I always approached, even with all of the horror I did, I always approached it as a storyteller first. I was characters number one, story number one, characters number two. What is the character arcs within that? And then whatever else comes with that, just understanding the mechanics and the creativity behind that, which of course with horror was special effects and understanding tension and suspense and jump scares and all of that. Um, I had been particularly studying action movies for a few years at that point, also really wanting to try to move into action. So when it came time to direct Rogue Hostage, it was, I think the biggest learning curve really was just the stunts, the action stunts. And I found there was a stunt coordinator I'd been working with for years as a producer on movies. And Drew and he's an amazing choreographer, an amazing stunt guy. And so him and a couple of other people, but basically we were able to kind of I just had to work out with the stunt coordinators how best, how these action pieces actually get put together in terms of shooting them and blocking them and figuring out the angles. And 2 or 3 days in, it all just kind of clicked in my head. And then I understood how to translate for all of the crew what was in my head, how I wanted to see it and how I wanted to shoot it. That was probably the only learning curve. The rest of it was still sticking to story, sticking to character, sticking to the arc, and then just learning some new techniques. And it was a blast. And I fell in love all over again with making movies.
It's funny, John. You're talking about it like it's so easy. It's not easy, people. What he's talking about is not easy. It's years of experience. Seriously, like all the things you said, every little category you brought up means something, and there's a whole world that goes into it. And
Absolutely.
and I understand where you're coming from. You and I have been trying to do something together for a while, and I get it. And the one thing I want to ask you is, you know, working with John Malkovich, working with Antonio Banderas, Jonathan Rhys Meyers. Um, what I know, I would love to hear about Malkovich and then the other two as well, and give me the details of what it was working with some of these big name actors.
It was fascinating because I mean I'd been fortunate enough to work with, as a director, I had worked with different name actors before. And then as a producer in that intermediate period, I'd been a producer on a lot of movies with big name actors. So I didn't have to, me personally, at that point, I didn't have to, as a director, have to worry about, the culture shock of suddenly having somebody so well known on set. But there's always, and this is kind of true my entire career, I'm just this way, is regardless of what movie I start in on. I mean, the movie I just did with William H. Macy and Katie Cassidy, I went into it with the same level of insecurity and trepidation as I would have from my very first movie of, I want to make you proud. I'm the storyteller, but I'm also, as a director, I'm your safety net. You're relying on me to help guide your performance and support your performance and make sure that you're help guiding them in the right choices and the right directions that they're going. And so, there's a lot, you read about a lot of actors, Anthony Hopkins and Morgan Freeman, that are like, just leave me alone. I'm just going to show up and I'm going to do my thing. And so you never know what kind of actor you're going to actually walk onto set with. And so there's always that insecurity. I mean, I remember reading an interview with with Tony Scott, one of my favorite directors, and he's like, he's
Yeah.
like, I did how many movies with Denzel Washington, and yet every time we started a new movie, I would show up for the first day, hoping I didn't drop the ball and screw up for Denzel,
Wow.
and
Wow.
so I got that, I understood that, and so like,
Amazing.
the first day that John Malkovich showed up, I mean, I'm a huge fan of John, and we'd had a couple of phone conversations before filming, and a terrific man, and a gentleman and respectful and stuff, but still you're like, okay, I want to say the right things, I want to do the right things, to support you, and John and I clicked really, really fast, and you learn. I don't know. For me as a director, the thing that I want to get to know with every single actor is, how do you like to be communicated with? How do you like to be directed? Because every actor has a different way of communicating and talking and hearing and understanding things. And so I want to get it down to, like, I've worked with a lot of theater actors in movies that are like, I'm here to serve you. So you just tell me anything and I'm going to do it. And then
Mm.
there's other actors that are like, give me direction, but I don't want to get into subtext. Subtext is my terrain. Stay out of it. You just give me the direction and the blocking. And then there's other actors, and this John ended up being one of these actors where he so innately gets the material and understands the character. And we had conversations about it, that really the directing of John becomes the blocking, where all of the actors are going to move around, and then just faster or slower. Hey, John, let's say it faster. Hey, John, let's say it slower. Let's do the scene faster. Let's do the scene slower. And it was funny. It was like the simplest direction. And John would turn around and look at me and goes, great call. Faster was so much better. And then we keep going, and it was fun. It was kind of fun that way. um I
So
got
basic
lucky.
at the end.
It's so
Basic.
basic, 100%. At the end of the day, and it's, I mean, Soderbergh's talked about it, Hitchcock talked about it, Spielberg talked about it, that 90% of your job as a director is hiring the right actors, and then the other 10% is telling them faster and slower. And that's, and in a lot of ways, it's very, very true.
Yeah.
So I try to approach every single actor. Antonio is one of the most innately talented actors I've ever worked with. Once again, he's super, super talented, incredibly friendly, incredibly polite. His biggest things are, he can speak English, but he's not a native English speaker. And so he still thinks in Spanish. And so his biggest thing would be for he and I to work through all of the dialogue to make sure that he was translating it properly in his head in
Wow.
Spanish, to make sure that he understood what I was trying to convey with the English.
Wow.
But once we did that, which was very fast. I mean, it's not like it was it was a very fast process. Sometimes we were just literally doing it in the camera rehearsal before we shot the scene. Um, but once, twice, and he's got it, and he's off to the races, and he's making nothing but brilliant choices the entire time.
It's funny you say this because he had to understand the language, but as an actor, he's so well versed that he just turns it on.
Oh, 100%. He completely turns it on, completely turns on. And it was fascinating was, so the two Irish movies we did together, we did them back to back. So he was in both of those movies, but we only had a limited period of time with them. So we had to shoot his scenes for both movies in the same week. And
Wow.
one was a very dark crime thriller, and the other one's a very zany action comedy. And he's playing two diametrically opposed characters. They're not similar in any way, shape, or form. And so he came in for a few days to play this dark, brooding private investigator who's very serious, and he came in, and we banged out his stuff over a few days. And literally the next day, he's walking onto set with an entirely different hairdo, a little pencil mustache, no beard, and he's this completely zany criminal gang mobster boss, and he's got the timing on the comedy down just perfectly. And it was amazing to watch, because they were, he gets it so quickly. And a lot of your well-known actors, that's why they're well known. That's the talent. That's, not to say that lots of actors have it, but actors who work all the time, they've got that innate sensibility and that innate knowledge of what the beats of a scene are and how to approach it and the choices that they make. And then as a director, you're just sitting back there, just kind of a little bit, push them a little bit left, push them a little bit right, just kind of guide them along. And if they get too big, come down. If you get too low, come back up.
You're a composer.
It is. I've actually, and it's funny is I for some reason I end up doing a lot of ensemble movies with 6, 8, 10 people on set, and at least once in every movie, at some point, I find myself doing this on set with all of the actors.
It is so amazing for you to talk about these golden nuggets that you're bringing up in this conversation. How do you? I know. I mean, it's impressive to work with such talent, and the business is very competitive. How do you put aside the business end of things? Because the business end of things, from all angles, since you are a producer as well, you understand that there's a lot of stuff. How do you make it like a compartmentalize things as you go, and how do you shut it down and get creative?
By having confidence in the people that you surround yourself with. That's really what it boils down to. It's all about the people that you surround yourself with. I mean, I've produced 4 more times the movies that I have directed. But even the movies that I've directed, most of the time, I've still been a producer at some level within those movies. And a lot of my job when I'm producing is putting budgets together, budgeting a movie and such. And so even when I'm directing, I tell producers, let me do the first pass of the budget myself. Let me do the budget because I understand budgeting so well. I understand parameters. I understand financing. I don't have to get in a fight with a line producer over what we can afford and can't because I already get it. So let me put down onto paper a budget that's going to fit your model, the amount of money that you got to spend. But I can tell you what I don't need, and I can tell you what I do need, and I know how to maneuver those things around. And so a lot of the times, not always, but a lot of the times when I'm directing, I'll put those budgets together. But there's always a producer there, or I always try to have a producer. Either it's somebody that I'm bringing with me to the table, or somebody I've already got a relationship with, and somebody that I respect, so that once we really get into pre-production, when it's time to get into the nitty-gritty, I can turn that budget over, the business over to them, and then just focus on creative and have producers there that are also shielding me. They're also shielding me and protecting me. I mean, I've been on sets where other producers hired me to direct. I brought a producer to the table. And without getting into stories and stuff, like I remember walking past the producer's office one day, and I heard my producer, the guy that I brought to the table, I heard him go, "Do we have a replacement for actor X?" And I was like, "Wait, this is the lead of the movie." And I stopped and I kind of looked back into the room, and I'm like, "What?" And all the producers turned and looked at me, and my producing partner on that just said, "Walk away. I'll tell you if you need to know anything." And I'm like, "Okay." And I trusted him. I trusted him to have my back. And I actually forgot it until the movie was over with. And then like a week into wrap, I'm like, "Okay, dude, what happened?" And he gave me the story. But it's all about the people you surround yourself with. I have been on movie sets as a director where I did not trust the producers. And that was very, very difficult because I'm literally trying to direct actors and I'm worried about the business side of things. And I'm trying to pay attention and I'm trying to help and I'm trying to pay, and that becomes very difficult. So fortunately,
It takes away. It takes away from.
it takes away 100%. A good producer, among all the other jobs a producer's doing, a good producer needs to shield the director. Let the director just be creative. If there's a financial conversation that has to be had, be appropriate about the time you choose to do that. Do it at the end of the day. When the day's over with and the director's done their job for the day, you got 12 hours until your next day. If there needs to be a financial conversation about choices that have to be made, don't do it when you stand. I mean, I've been on sets as a director where I've had a producer come to me in between take 2 and 3 to want to talk about a financial problem. And I'm like, I need to be focused on my actors and the story that I'm telling, not on that, especially when that thing isn't first days down the road. let's do it at the end of the day. And so that, I want, as a producer, I want my director to be focused on nothing but the creative and putting the best story down. I don't want them distracted by things that are going to skew how they're viewing performance and camera and things like that.
How do you perceive the business status right now with everything that's going on? I want to talk a little bit about distribution and just the what's going on within the film industry, domestic and international. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I've been around long enough to see the industry evolve and change many times, so many times that, I will say that right now, with my perception of where the industry's at right now, this is one of the harder transitional periods, if we want to call it that. I mean, I've been around, the crash of 2008 when everything went bonkers and completely away, how things changed with COVID, how things changed with Netflix and Amazon and streaming becoming a thing. Hell, I mean, how things changed from film to digital and how that changed the industry. I mean, where the industry's at right now is 180 degrees different than it was for me a year and a half ago. I was talking with somebody yesterday and I'm like, there was the industry up until the strike a year and a half ago, and then there's the industry since the strike. And it's
Can you elaborate on that? Because man, that's information right there.
Well, I mean, so before the strike, so one of the things that was happening before the strike was there was a market model, a distribution model that a lot of people could rely on. What that might be, we'll just kind of use what the world I'm working in, action films. You go, you do an action film, you get your one big name actor that's going to be on the poster, that's going to drive all the sales. You bring them in to film for 2 or 3 days. You bang out all of their stuff, and then you go in and you shoot the rest of the movie. Buyers were paying lots of money for that. Actor fees were fair. Distribution, everybody was just, rampant hungry for content, especially post COVID. And so that model was working really well. Get my one big name actor, put 2 or 3 ancillary actors in there as far as names go to help with sales, and you've got a movie. And you're probably looking at a $6 to $9 million movie in that sort of model in that indie space. And then the strike happens. And part of what happens with the strike or post strike is that all the union rates go up, all the rules change. So first off, particularly for indies, the financial burden of those changes becomes much harder. Not to say that I mean, everybody across the board is going to get impacted by those financial changes. A studio making $100 million movie can absorb those rising costs easier than a $5 million indie movie can. So that was one factor that came out after the strike. The other factor, I think, was there were 3 big factors. Second was, it came out during the strike, a lot of the streamers were not making the profits that all of their people thought that they were making. And so the reality of profit models went sort of belly up, and the streamers all kind of went, we can't keep paying this amount of money. We can't keep generating this amount of content. We need to make them less, and we need to buy less. So that changes the market. And then the third part of that was the model that we just talked about before the strike. Buyers got savvy to that during the strike and went, wow, we keep paying top dollar for this movie with actor X, who's only actually in the movie for like 25 minutes. And now the audiences are getting savvy to that, and they're getting angry. So we need more name actors in the movie. And so what ends up happening post strike is buyers are paying less. They want more actors. Agents want more money for the actors. I mean, distributors want less. And so you come out. So basically where we're sitting at is in a market where everybody's trying to figure out what that new financial model is. How do we get these movies sold and break even? How do we Agents, I think, are starting to come around to the understanding that post strike, we can't keep asking for the same numbers we were asking for. We've got to take less. but you still have the conundrum of dealing with buyers wanting bigger names and what more names, and distributors wanting less content. So you have to make a bigger, stronger movie with more people in it. And I think we're all still trying to figure out what that is. I mean, the one thing that I've seen is that sort of $6 million to $9 million market for that window is kind of gone away. You're either making movies that are above 9 million with really big name actors, or you're making movies that are 5 million and under. I mean, a lot of movies I got asked to direct prior to the strike, even prior to COVID, most of those fell in the 6 to 9 million range. A majority of movies that are getting brought to me now to produce are in that $3 million range, because they have to make them for less because everybody's paying less for them. Or the flip side, I'm either getting asked to do 3 million, or I'm asked to get 10 to 15 million, with much bigger names. And so it's still trying to figure out how to navigate that. And it's making it more difficult. Less movies are being made, I believe, based on, everything I see in here. Less movies are being made. So there's less movies for actors to go around. So it's harder to get those name actors into movies right now. It's a big conundrum that everybody's still trying to work through. And I think it's slowly the industry starting to pick back up. Buyers are starting to pick back up. I think it's all slowly evolving and picking back up, but I'm also seeing a lot of productions leave the US and go overseas, go over to Europe, go over to Eastern Europe, go down to Spain, Portugal, places where it's cheaper to film movies than in the US. And that's a shame. That's a shame for the US, but I also, with a budget mind, financing producer's hat on, I get it. If you've only got X number of dollars, you got to go where it makes the most sense to stretch those dollars to make the biggest movie you can.
I have to say, John, this is a wonderful information because a lot of frustration is in the business right now, obviously, and even, I mean, LA has suffered quite a bit now, even with what's going on with the fires. But an interesting story that happened. A few of my projects that we've talked about. There's one that I was gonna do myself, and I sent it to an agent in the UK for an actor, and they came back. Oh, we love this script. It's a great script. We want to do this script. I said, okay. He goes, can you put an offer? Like they're the ones asking me to give them an offer. So I did my due diligence and figured out who, where, what, and I gave him an offer. No need to say how much, but I gave him an offer, and they came back. And this is an actor who is known, but by no means, Sylvester Stallone or any high ranking. It was an actor that's solid, but not a huge actor. And they came back asking for 80% more.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, no, no. I mean, there was an actor that we were trying to attach to a movie that I had done three previous movies with, and we submitted an offer based on the what we had paid on three previous movies, and they came back with a counter that was three times the amount. And I was like, wait, this makes no sense. We've got precedents. We've done this before. And they're like, well, yeah, but I'm just making this up, but
Yeah,
Netflix wants them, Amazon wants them, blah 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 wants them, and they're willing to pay that amount. And I'm like, well, if Amazon wants to pay X number of dollars, that they've got endless coffers of money. This is an indie movie, This is what it is, and I do keep experiencing that's starting to fall away, but I do keep experiencing that where, and I think that might be some of the backlash to the fact that there's less content being made, so therefore the actors are making less. It's the quantity over quality type of idea. They're
yeah.
they're not making movie after movie after movie, so they need to make more on each movie that they're doing. But that doesn't fit into our financing model because of what distribution and buyers are willing to pay for something. And so
That's interesting.
that's this big thing that everything's still trying to kind of get find an alignment to.
This reminds me of like a housing market kind of a situation.
100%. 100%. It's absolutely like a housing market. That's
That's a
absolutely right.
How's it? So you
Yeah.
got like you got all of a sudden a certain part of the town or city or state becomes super popular, and everybody starts raising the prices, and everybody's just until it becomes a bubble, and I think we reached the bubble, and then
Hmm.
it bursts. It's done,
Yep.
and
Absolutely.
that's where we're at.
And the strike burst the bubble. That's exactly it. The strike burst
Oh
the
my
bubble.
God, dude, the
Yeah.
strike. Don't get me started with the strike. I think you were involved in some of those things we were doing, but I mean, I mean, all due respect, I love SAG, but my God, it was so challenging. It was challenging enough to get a movie made, and then all of a sudden, I gotta convince the clerk on the other side of the telephone that the movie is a good movie to go. And oh, yes, that's great, but you're a number 700 in the queue. I'm like, what?
Exactly. I know. I remember that. I totally forgot about that. I remember that. Yeah. What were they called? Yeah. Whatever those waivers were,
The queue,
the SAG
yeah.
waiver thing. Yeah. Whatever
Oh
that was.
my
But
God,
yeah,
bro.
you're
I was
968 in the queue.
I'm like, what? And then I noticed the change in the tone and the way the agents would talk to you. They were a lot more open to talk to you now.
That's for sure. 100% they were.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like, and it's funny. A lot of the agents that I was dealing with, they're all jumped ship. They not all of them, but a lot of them went to different companies or they became whatever. They shifted. People can't sustain the hype and the quote unquote the tuxedo 24/7. It's impossible to
Yeah.
be
No,
that.
yeah, exactly. No, it is. It is amazing just to see the cyclical nature of how things are constantly changing, and every year it's always changing. I mean, the distribution buyers world is constantly changing based on what's the hit show and what's the hit movie, and all of those normal things. But then there's that cyclical. Every 3 to 5 years, there is some major upheaval that completely shifts the face and the dynamic of the film industry, and then we have to figure out how to put the pieces back together and how to make it all start working again, and then you get another 3 to 5 years out of it, and then it all changes up again because of something.
Would you agree that content is still king or no?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, elaborate on that. What do you mean by
So,
that?
meaning a good script or a good screenplay still is that golden precious nugget that everybody wants to make their, movie or no, it's just for a lot of people it's just a product. Doesn't matter as long as they can get the star.
I think, yeah, and that's kind of what I was hoping. That's kind of what I thought and was hoping you were kind of going at. I feel like it's still a lot about product. I hate saying that. I feel like it's still a lot about product. I'm going to be very curious to see coming out of the award season right now, where you got a lot of these movies that are not the expected awards movies, the Amelia Perez and the Anora and the Brutalist, and a lot of these movies. I'm going to be very curious because that to me, that's content is king, story is king, and the thing that I appreciate about all those movies is they're not your typical product. They are entirely story driven, and somebody took a chance on those movies. And I'll be curious to see if that changes some of the dynamic, later on this year or mid-year, if that some of that dynamic is going to change. But I do feel like, so many people I still talk to, it's product. It's what's the genre,
Packaging.
how it's packaging. That's exactly it. It's who's in it, what's the story, how do I pitch it? And and they want it very clear cut, not action comedy zombie movie, just is it a zombie movie, is it an action movie, is it a horror movie, is it a this, is it that? They want it very straightforward. I mean, but I feel like, I hate to say it, but most of my career has been that though. It's product. They're the company who's distributing it is looking at what's the most sensible movies I can take on to make the most amount of money off of, and that's going to typically be a very safe bet. And they're just looking at it as a product, and I get it. I totally get where they're coming from, and a lot of times I've learned to let go of that marketing thing as a director. I'm like, you are here to make the most amount of money possible, so you are going to make all the smartest choices possible to see that happen. So I'm going to just kind of get out of your way. I just want to find myself surrounded by people that even if even if somebody's still just treating it as a product, I want to know that the people I'm with making the movie, whether it's a director, whether I'm a director or a producer or a writer, they care about the content of what that is. They care about the content. So we're striving to make the best movie possible with the resources we have, with the strongest script we have, with the best actors that we have, so that when it turns into a product for that distributor to take, they can then do the best that they can and the strongest they can with the best movie possible.
Do you think that the sales companies are adjusting to this, or are they, what's their story? What's your perspective on that?
I think the sales companies are still, I think they're still, I think we're all still trying to figure out what is the market right now. I think that's the thing is I think we're all, other than everybody wants more well-known actors in a movie. I think everybody, I mean, action is still king because it sells so incredibly well both in the US and overseas. Dramas don't do well overseas. Horror still does well. So there's all of those components that I don't think those components as a product have changed. But I still think, what do people want? I think that's still changing. And I think, and when I say what do people want, what do buyers want? And I think that the sales agencies and sales companies are still trying to figure out, navigate that now as well, because it keeps changing so rapidly.
John, I know you're short on time, so I'm going to ask you two questions. The one thing is, what have you learned from your failures?
Well, I mean, the first thing that jumps in my head is to never give up, and my second, probably what have I learned from my failures? Never give up, forgive yourself, and learn. Those are that's the thing that there's so many people that treat something as treat a failure, whatever, however we want to define that. But it's people that want to treat a failure as some personal stigma against them, that they have somehow failed themselves, that they are somehow not a worthwhile person or worthwhile in the business or whatever those things are. To me, failures are just simply stepping stones. They're stepping stones to something else. They're a way for me to learn about myself. They're a way for me to learn about the industry. They're a way for me to learn about smarter choices. To me, what I've learned about failure is failure just makes me a smarter person and a better person.
John, we need people like you in the business, and I think it's people like you with such a strong backbone in what you do, and the love for what you do is, I think, pretty obvious. The love for what you do, and I've dealt with you, and I think you have a really good energy and aura about you. What's on the horizon for you right now? What are you working on? What's coming up?
I'm not. So it's funny is I don't actually know right now. So
I got
I'm
a
also.
project for you.
Okay, I know you do.
Keep
I'm
going.
editing. Of course, I'm editing. I'm doing post on Speed Demon, the movie that I just directed. Still a couple that we produced over the summer that still need to get delivered. And then, yeah, I mean, I'm like, I've got a second monitor here, and I'm looking at this monitor, and I've got like all these clusters of documents all over this monitor here. Of, well, maybe this one, maybe this one. I've got three or four of my own that I'm working on trying to set up to direct. I've got probably another half a dozen that I've been asked to direct. And then I've probably got another 10 that people are circling around on to produce. And I've always learned, and it's always this way. I hit the new year reaching out to people, reaching out to companies, looking at what's been on my plate, kind of going, okay, what's this year going to be like? But inevitably, it's usually February when things really start to happen. And so right now, it's a lot of answering questions, lots of phone calls, lots of emails, lots of waiting to see what comes together. Because I mean, a single person can only, this, you can only do so much. So I've got my three or four that I'm trying to set up for myself to direct. And then I've got all of these others, and that I'm kind of relying on these others to bring the elements necessary for me to then go, okay, and I'll take over now and start running with it. So I'm not
Right
sure
on.
what's up next. I'm not sure what's up next, except that I
Well,
feel good that it's going to be a good year.
I think it's going to be a great year, and I think people are going to come out of everything that's going on. I think there's a clarity that's going to be coming through what we were talking about. John, I want to thank you for coming on. You
Thank you for having me. It's been great. It's fun catching up with you.
Absolutely. And I think I hope many, 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 many people see this within the industry and also outside the industry. This was such an educational conversation. People have to pay $100,000 for a school to learn half the stuff you just said. So thank you for giving me your time, and I will talk to you soon, John.
Sounds good. Thanks. Take care, brother.